Today, we are starting a new volume 3. The picture has changed. The colors have changed. It is volume 3 of the Gospel Project. This is Land and Loss. So if we can all stand today as we read the word of the Lord. Today's title is God Leads His People Out of Joshua 3. There are 4 slides. 4 slides. I will read for us first, okay? I'll read for us first because that is real small font, okay? And then you guys, then me, then all of us together, okay? Joshua 3, verse 1 to 4. This is just me. Early the next morning, Joshua and all the Israelites left and arrived at the banks of the Jordan River. 3 days later, the Israelite officers went through the camp, giving these instructions to the people. When you see the Levitical priests carrying the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord your God, move out from your positions and follow them. Stay about half a mile behind them, keeping a clear distance between you and the Ark. Make sure you don't come any closer. All together, ready? Begin. Then Joshua told the people, "Purify yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do great wonders among you." In the morning, Joshua said to the priests, "Lift up the Ark of the Covenant and lead the people across the river." And so they started out and went ahead of the people. Verse 7 and 8. The Lord told Joshua, "Today I will begin to make you a great leader in the eyes of all the Israelites. They will know that I am with you, just as I was with Moses. Give this command to the priests who carry the Ark of the Covenant. When you reach the banks of the Jordan River, take a few steps into the river and stop there." Last one, all together. Ready? Begin. So Joshua told the Israelites, "Come and listen to what the Lord your God says. Today you will know that the living God is among you. He will surely drive out the Canaanites ahead of you. Look, the Ark of the Covenant, which belongs to the Lord of the whole earth, will lead you across the Jordan River. The priests will carry the Ark of the Lord. As soon as their feet touch the water, the flow of water will be cut off upstream, and the river will stand up like a wall." This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. You may be seated. So we are in our new volume, next slide, Land and Loss. So finally, after all this time, we are here in this volume, moving through the books of Joshua, Judges, Ruth, and the beginning of 1 Samuel, which is carrying us through a certain period in Israel's history. They are no longer in the wilderness. They're going to enter the promised land, but they're going to fight and conquer the promised land, and they have to figure out how to follow God, who is not visibly there with them, as their king. Israel is a theocracy. Theocracy meaning God is the ruler of the nation, versus all around them are monarchies, kings ruling over powerful nations. And so they are going to have to learn how to follow God as their king. And that takes us through the book of Joshua, Judges, Ruth, the beginning of 1 Samuel. And so here we are. There are a couple of common themes. As we start this volume, I want us to all orient to the same place. There are a couple of common themes, common threads you're going to hear over and over again for the next 13 weeks as we go through this volume. And one of those themes is this, is that God is consistently and persistently making a way for his people to come to him. That is what God is doing over and over again, making a way for the people of God to come back to him. A second theme we're going to often see is that the Israelites, remember, they are a reflection of us, right? Are prone to wander, to veer away, to go off of the path. And when they disobey, it results in destruction. But when they do obey, it results in victory and blessing. So we see both of those sides. Even for us today, we are called to hold on to God's promises. And yet our job is to be faithful to him. And yet we are prone to wander, just like the Israelites. And that's so hard for us to do. But the good news about this volume is this: the God who was God over the Israelites yesterday, thousands of years ago, is the same God who is the God over us today in the present. He will keep his promises. He will fight your battles. He is present with you. He is the constant source of hope when there seems to be no hope. And that is the common theme that we're going to hear over and over and over again. And so as we start this new volume, I want to encourage you, I want to ask you, what are the things that I have been wrestling with? The things that I have been waiting on God for, and yet I have not seen come to pass. And so I have grown discouraged, or I have wandered. What are those things for you? Because perhaps in these next few weeks as we do this, God will speak to you through the Israelites. Now, here we are. We're starting a new book, the book of Joshua. Remember, the first 5 books of the Old Testament are called the Torah. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, okay? We are now past those 5 books. We are in the next book, which is Joshua, okay? And Joshua has a unique thing going on. So these folks do it way better than I do. So we're going to actually watch BibleProject, a little video, overviewing Joshua and the book at large, okay? Do we have it ready in the back? Is it ready in the back? Okay, go to the next slide. Can we make sure the sound is on? Can you press play? All right, folks, here we are. Book of Joshua. If you're taking notes, now's a good time to take notes.
Let's back up and
All right, here we go.
the book of Joshua. Let's back up and remember the story so far. So God chose Abraham, and then his family became the people of Israel, who are then enslaved down in Egypt. And so through Moses, God rescued Israel out of Egypt. He made a covenant with them at Mount Sinai, and he brought them through the wilderness. So Israel then camped outside the promised land, and Moses called them to obey God's commands so that they could show all the other nations what God is like. The book of Joshua picks up right after Moses has died, and Israel's ready to enter the land. So the story of Joshua is designed with 4 main movements. Joshua first leads Israel into the promised land, and then once they're there, they meet all this hostility from the Canaanites, and so they engage them in battle. Then after their victories, Joshua divides up the promised land as the inheritance for the 12 tribes, and then the book concludes with these final speeches that Joshua gives to the people. So let's dive in and we'll see how all of it flows together. The first section begins with Moses' death, and Joshua is appointed as Israel's new leader. And the author intentionally presents Joshua as a new Moses. So like Moses, Joshua calls the people to obey the Torah, which means the covenant commands that they were given at Mount Sinai. And then Joshua sends spies into the land, just as Moses did back in Numbers chapters 13 and 14, except it goes way better this time. In fact, even some Canaanites turn and follow the God of Israel. Joshua then leads all Israel across the Jordan River and into the land. Just like the sea parted for Moses in the Exodus, so here the river Jordan parts and the priests carry the Ark of the Covenant across, leading all Israel with them. Now, in chapter 5, the story transitions. So the people look back to their roots as God's covenant people, and so the new generation is circumcised and they celebrate their first Passover in the land. But then they turn and prepare to go forward. And Joshua has this crazy encounter with a mysterious warrior, who, it turns out, is the angelic commander of God's army. And Joshua asks, "Are you for us or are you for our enemies?" And the warrior responds, neither, which shows that the real question here is whether Joshua is on God's side. It makes clear that this whole story is not about Israel versus the Canaanites. Rather, this is God's battle, and Israel is going to play the role of spectators or sometimes supporters in God's plan, which leads to the next section. We find stories about all these conflicts that Israel had with different Canaanite groups. And the first part retells the story of 2 battles in detail, and that's followed by a series of short stories that condense years of battles into a few brief summaries. So the first 2 battles are against Jericho and then Ai, and they offer these contrasting portraits of God's faithfulness versus Israel's failure. At Jericho, Israel is to take a completely passive approach. So they let God's presence in the ark lead them around the city to music for 6 days. And just like Rahab turned to the God of Israel, maybe the people of Jericho would do the same, but they don't. And so on the 7th day, the priests blow the trumpets and the walls come falling down, leading Israel to victory. The point of the story is that God is the one who will deliver his people. Israel simply needs to trust and wait. Now, the next story of the battle at Ai makes the opposite point. So there's this Israelite named Achan, and he steals from Jericho some of the devoted goods that were to belong to God alone, and then he lies about it. It's a pretty lame move after all that God has done for Israel. And so Israel goes into battle with the city of Ai, and they're totally defeated. And it's only after humble repentance and severely dealing with Achan's sin that Israel gains victory. And so together, these 2 stories, they're placed right up front to make an important point. If Israel is going to inherit the land, they have to be obedient and trust in God's commands. They don't get special treatment. Now, the second part of this section begins with the Gibeonites, a Canaanite people group, and they do just what Rahab did as they turn to follow the God of Israel and they make peace with Israel. This is in contrast to all of these other Canaanite kings who start to form alliances and coalitions, and they want to destroy Israel. So Israel engages them in battle, and they win by a landslide. And so this whole section concludes with this summary list of all of these victories won by Moses and then by Joshua. Now, let's stop for a second, because odds are that these stories and the violence in them, they're going to bother you. And if you're a follower of Jesus, you're bound to wonder, like, didn't Jesus say to love your enemies? Why is God declaring war here? So first, why the Canaanites? The main reasons are actually given earlier in the biblical story. It's that the culture of the Canaanites had become extremely morally corrupt, especially when it comes to sex. Go check out Leviticus chapter 18. And they also widely practiced child sacrifice. Go see Deuteronomy chapter 12. And so God didn't want these practices to influence Israel. The Canaanites had to go. Which raises the second question. Did God actually command the destruction of all the Canaanites, like a genocide? So at first glance, you look at the phrases used in these stories. They totally destroyed them. They left no survivor or anything that breathed. But when you look a second time more closely, you'll see that these phrases are clearly hyperbole and not literal. So go back to the original command about the Canaanites in Deuteronomy chapter 7. Israel is first told to drive out the Canaanites, but then to totally destroy them. And then that's followed by commands to not intermarry with them or enter into business deals with them. So you can't marry someone that you've destroyed. I think you get the point. The same idea applies to the stories in Joshua. Look closely. So for example, we're told in Joshua chapter 10 that Israel left no survivors in the cities of Hebron or Debir. But then later in chapter 15, we see these towns and they're still populated by Canaanites. And so what we're seeing is that Joshua fits in with other ancient battle accounts by using non-literal hyperbolic language as part of the narrative style. And so the word genocide doesn't actually fit what we see here, especially in light of the stories about the Canaanites who did turn to the God of Israel, like Rahab or the Gibeonites. God was open to those who would turn to him. The last thing to think about is that these stories mark a unique moment in Israel's history. These battles were limited to the handful of people groups living in the land of Canaan. With all other nations, Israel was commanded by God to pursue peace. Go read Deuteronomy chapter 20. So the purpose of these battle stories was never to tell you, the reader, to go commit violence in God's name. Rather, they show God bringing his justice on human evil at a unique moment in history and how he delivered Israel from being annihilated by the Canaanites. Now, let's go back to the book's design. After years of battles, we see an aging Joshua, and he starts dividing up the land for the 12 tribes of Israel. And most of this section is like lists of boundary lines. And let's be honest, it's kind of boring. It's like reading a map that has no pictures. But for the Israelites, these lists were super important. This was the fulfillment of God's ancient promises to Abraham that his descendants would inherit the promised land. And so now it was all coming to pass right down to the detail, which leads to the final section. Joshua gives two speeches to the people that are very similar to the final speeches of Moses in Deuteronomy. Joshua reminds them of God's generosity, how he brought them into the land and rescued them from the Canaanites. And so he calls them to turn away from the Canaanite gods and be faithful to the covenant they made. If they do, it will lead to life and blessing in the land. But if they're unfaithful, Israel will call down on itself the same divine judgment that the Canaanites experienced. They'll be kicked off the land into exile. And so Joshua leaves Israel with a choice. What is Israel going to do? That's the big question that looms as the story ends, and that's the book of Joshua.
So some context, right? What's the most important thing when we read scripture? Context. Context is really important. That part they talked about on the side, about did God initiate genocide, that is often the question most people struggle with this book of Joshua. It's like, it reads like a battle account, like war, battle, soldiers killing everybody. It's like a big, giant military movie, okay? But that part was really, really important. They did a great job explaining that. Of like, remember, this is written at a time and a culture in history where they used hyperbole. They exaggerated things. And yet what really actually happened was that they didn't drive everybody out. They didn't kill everybody that they're supposed to. And so in doing so, they also made peace with the people around them. But the point being that the land is so important. Why? Because this harkens back to 500 years before the Israelites are here today. In Joshua 3, they are standing at the foot of the river. And yet what they are realizing now is that they represent 500 years of God's promise are now going to come to pass. When Abraham had no children, no sons, and God said, look at the sky, you will have as numerous as the stars in the sky. He saw one son, one of his sons carry on that promise. That son had twins. That second twin had 12 sons. And these 12 sons became 12 tribes who were enslaved for 400 plus years, but they've been miraculously delivered. Wandered for 40 years because they disobeyed. And now their children are the ones who are sitting at the foot of the river, waiting to cross, enter into the promised land that God promised Abraham. Your children will have this land. This is a big deal. It might not read like a big deal, but it is a big deal what's happening today. Remember, these children, they were maybe young when they experienced the Red Sea. They might not remember exactly what happened there. They've only heard their parents say, yo, God is powerful. You know what he did in my day? In my day, when I was your age, this is what I experienced God do, okay? And they're like, yeah, Dad, you crossed the Red Sea. Good for you. That's probably what they did. But now it's their turn to experience God's power moving in their lives. And so here they are. This is not just any old river. Go to Joshua 3, verses 1-4. This is not some kind of river, okay? I grew up in Arizona, so I have no context for rivers until I actually came here, okay? Because we don't have no rivers. You have like an old dry creek that 50 years ago had water and now no longer has any water, okay? But river, we're talking like big river. This is Jordan River during flood season. In the springtime when the snow has melted, and it's like, like whitewater rafting, you know what I mean? We're talking that kind of current, okay? That's what's going on. You don't just dip your toes into the Jordan River during flood time, okay? But they are literally It's like, God, if you could have timed it out, man, you should have timed out a different time of year. Why? You had 40 years to time this out, God. Why are you timing it out to the busiest, most like current, rushing, dangerous time of this river? And yet here they are. And God is telling them, this is not just like your family crossing the Oregon Trail crossing. This is like 2 million people and all their livestock have to cross this gushing, flood-filled river. The Hebrew word azar, which is to cross, happens more than 20 times in this passage. And what that shows us is that God is saying, you will cross. You will cross. See this gushing torrent river? You will cross because I will go before you and you will see what your parents saw, that I go before you and therefore nothing stands in your way. And so here we have this first main point that God is faithful to keep his promise, even if it takes 500 years. Abraham died never knowing this would happen. His great, however many children are the ones who are experiencing God's promise come to pass. But he is faithful to keep his promise. He will go before them. Notice here in this passage that they tell him the Ark of the Covenant. Remember how God was a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night for the Israelites in the wilderness? Well, now it's the Ark of the Covenant. They've made the Ark. The Ark is like literally a symbol of God's throne being on earth, God's presence being on earth. And so now they have this literal symbol of God's throne. You guys know in those like battle movies, what are those really famous ones? What's the one with Mel Gibson? What's that one called? No, there's like Braveheart, okay? Okay, he's like carrying that. He's old now. But back in the day, man, he was a good looking man, okay? But you know, like in all those like warrior movies, the like main dude, the like general, leader, commander, whatever it is, what does he do? Is he like, yo, go fight? God with you? I'm going to hang out back here, okay? I'll just chill. Is that what they do? No. The commander, the man in charge, he gives a big pep talk. He's like, we've got this. And they're like, wah, right? And then he goes first. That's the sign of a good leader is he goes first, head into battle. This is God. This Ark of the Covenant, it don't look like really Braveheart-ish, but this is what God is doing. He is walking into the battle first, saying, I go before you. And so they tell him, this is your battle strategy. Okay? See that gushing river that if you lose your step, you're going to go down to who knows where, okay? I want you guys to take the Ark of the Covenant and walk in. And they're like, that's a real great battle plan. Okay? It's a real great battle plan. But he's like, we're going to walk in and you're all going to follow. But do not get too close. Because if you do, you'll get destroyed. That's how powerful God's presence is. And so the second main point is this. God is not just faithful to keep his promise, but he is faithful to be with you in the promise. I heard this saying recently this week. God will not only bring you to it, but he will get you through it. Whatever it is that God has brought you to, he is faithful to get you through. It's the exact same principle here. He is faithful to keep his promise. He will bring you to where he said he would, and he will bring you through it if you know and learn how to trust in him. So let me ask you this today. Maybe you've been in the wilderness for a long time. If you are a certain age and you are older than 20, then you've probably experienced season of waiting, season of struggle, your dreams not coming true, or whatever it is. And it's rough. It's hard. Maybe you've been waiting for God's promise for a long time. No one here has been waiting 500 years, but sometimes it feels like it. Remember that God is faithful to bring you to it, and he is faithful to bring you through it. That is the bottom line. How God does that is up to him. But our choice to be faithful, that's what determines if we're going to experience that or not. How do you sense God's presence leading you right now? How do you sense God's presence leading you right now? Because his presence is leading you. You just may not see it the way everyone else sees it. Here in verse 5, the natural response to God leading us is this. Joshua calls his people, purify yourselves for tomorrow. God's going to show up. God's going to show up and do great wonders. The same wonders your parents talked about, they weren't lying. They weren't lying. God's going to do it now with you. So purify yourself. Cleanse yourself. Be set apart. The word consecration means set apart. God is showing them, you're going to enter the land. Remember the video was saying that the Canaanites, specifically, the reason why this was the map, right, of the people that they had to go to battle against, was that there was extreme corruption going on in Canaan. Religiously, politically, and then within families, like extreme. We're talking like the worst of the worst of the worst of the worst sins that people can do. The Canaanites legalized and all did. Does that make sense? Like that's how it was. We think it's bad in our generation. It was way worse with the Canaanites. Okay, that's how bad it was. And so God is saying, you are going to enter a land that is so vastly different from you. And before you enter it, I want you to be holy and set apart because you are different. You are different than these people. You will not be like them. And you walking in is like light touching darkness. You walking into this land is like light touching darkness. You guys know my favorite scene from Lion King? Everywhere the light touches is our kingdom, right? Okay, that's literally what it is. It's like God is saying, when you walk in, it is light breaking into a dark kingdom, and you will be light. But if you don't stand for light, the darkness will overwhelm you. And so you will be set apart. You will be holy. So it's not just that God is faithful. It's not just that God will bring you through it. It's this. There is a response required of us as well. And that response is to be set apart, to be holy, to be different in the way that God calls us to be different. So what about you? Right? It's not just that God brings us, that God's going to carry us. We are called to also be set apart. We are called to be light and different. What are the ways that you and I are different in the spaces that we occupy? Whether it's work, school, and our families. What are the ways that you and I are light? Because if you are not light, the darkness will swallow you up. That's how this world works. And so if you don't walk out as light, if you don't charge up your light bulb here and walk out and keep charging it throughout the week, through his word and through prayer and through worship, you can't stand. It's not going to stand. That light's going to dim real fast. That's why it's not easy. It's hard to live as a Christian. And yet, what other life would I live? What other God would I follow? What other thing would I give my life to that is going to last beyond eternity? Is this kingdom? Is this God? Here we are in verse 7. Today, God is speaking out of Joshua, because Joshua's probably like a little scared, like, oh man, what did I sign up for? Like Moses had a hard time. How am I going to do this? The Lord said to Joshua, today, what I've already told you, because in private with Moses, God already appointed Joshua as the leader. But now he's like, I've called you privately, and I'm going to publicly affirm my calling now. Today, I'll begin to make you a great leader in the eyes of the Israelites. They will know that I am with you just as I was with Moses. And so, hey, this is your job. Give this command. Levites, go into the river. That's it. At least Moses got a staff and he got to lift it, okay? But like Joshua, he's just like, go. That's all he's told to do. That's it. That's it. There's not actually much that Joshua does but obey God. That's it. But God will always be with those he calls. If he has called you, whether it's in your workspaces, or maybe he's called you to love your family that's sick, or maybe he's called you to love a spouse that's difficult some days, or maybe he's called you, whatever it is, whatever he's called you to be a light to your unbelieving family. Whatever it is he's called you to in this season, he will be faithful to equip you for that call. I still remember we joke nowadays because back in the day, when Pastor and I got married, I was 25, he was 27, and we didn't know nothing, okay? We didn't know anything about life. And I saved up money, we got married on that money, and then we went to the middle of nowhere, Kansas, okay? And he started a seminary degree. And we worked and stuff, but we didn't make a lot. Also very cheap to live there. Do you guys know how much our first mortgage was? Less than $1,000 a month is what our mortgage was when we first bought that house, okay? It was a long time ago. It was like more than 10 years ago. That house was old, but here we go. Here we are. What was my point? My point was this, okay? We joke now like, Yobo, if some guy comes knocking and he's like, oh, I want to marry Jiyoung, and we're like, what you going to do for a living? He's like, I don't know, man, but I'm going to follow Jesus. I'm like, will you let her go? He's like, I don't know. I'm like, my parents did that to you, okay? They were like, you're going to follow Jesus? Great. I'm like, good thing my parents love Jesus, man, because otherwise we would not be here. But the point being, we didn't know what we were doing. We just walked in blind faith. And I still remember before my wedding night, I was like a few weeks before my wedding, and my mom was talking to me, and I knew at that point he was called to ministry, and I was starting to get the like, oh my God, what did I get myself into? Can I do this? My mom said, whatever God has called you to, he will give you the grace to walk through that calling. Because it's not your calling. God has called you. And if God calls you, 하나님이 책임질 거야. He's going to take responsibility and lead you through. And on my toughest seasons, there are some days, y'all, when this life ain't easy, okay? And I'm like, God, you will carry me through. This is your calling. This is not my calling. You're going to do this. You have to do it because you called me to it. It's up to you, man. You got to do this because I can't do it. That's why when you are in tough seasons, when you are in your hard work seasons or serving a family that doesn't believe God or they're sick or whatever hard thing God's called you to, you got to remember why God's called you to it. Because otherwise you will not endure. Because what God has called you to, he will carry you through. If you just trust. Verse 9. So Joshua said, 3 things here. I want you to look out for these 3 things. First, come, you 2 million crazy people, come and listen to what the Lord your God says. Because number 2, today you will know that the living God, he ain't dead. He is living and he's among you. Number 3, he will surely drive out the Canaanites ahead of you. 3 parts to his words. First, come and listen. Come and listen. Remember how the Israelites failed so many times in the wilderness, right? Like 3 days after the Red Sea, they're complaining. Let's go back to Egypt because God sucks. You know, like that was what they did. And God, in his mercy, rained down bread from heaven for 40 years. You know what that's like? That's like having a full year's paycheck given to you on your doorstep every day for 40 years. Do you know how good that is? That's like your food, your insurance, your medical coverage, like all your money just at your door every single morning. You don't got to do nothing but walk out and collect it. That's what that was like, you guys. They complained, he gave them 40 years of provision. They go 12 spies. We can't do it. God's like, oh my God, again? Like, you guys do not learn your lesson. So you will spend 40 years feeding off my table. We talk about 40 years and how awful that was. You guys, that was 40 years of God providing for them. It talks about in other parts of, I forget where it is, but like their sandal never wore down. Their sandals never, 40 years of walking in the wilderness, their sandals never wore down. Their clothes never like, what's the word? You know, like got old. Like they never got sick. This is the perfect nutritional profile given to them every single morning. Those 40 years, man, it was not bad. That's not a bad setup, right? Like all they had to learn was to trust God. And so Joshua is saying, do not forget the most important listen is come and listen to God. Listen and obey. because that's what your parents failed to do. And so they all died without entering the promised land. So you, new generation, you young folk here, Joshua is saying, come and listen. That is the most important thing you can do, because God is with you and he will carry you through. Now is the time to step up and experience God for yourselves. So let me ask you, most of us, we've experienced God in some degree, or we've heard people ahead of us talk about the faithfulness of God. So let me challenge you, this new generation. Have you experienced God's voice over your life? Have you experienced his provision, his guidance over your life, the way our parents talk about it? Even beyond the way our parents talk about it. Because here's the thing. First step is come and listen. Come and listen. You know when we get scared and we get anxious and we freak out? God's like, it's okay, man. Take a deep breath. Come and listen. That's the first step. Come and listen. And next is that you will see that God is with you. You will experience God for yourself. Every generation encounters God in a unique way. You know, they say like every generation gets worse. Like the things that elementary school kids face now is way worse than what we faced. It is true, okay? Every generation seems to get darker. But if you look at history, at least in America, right? Like when there was the biggest hippie movement going on back in the 60s, 70s, right? Drugs, crazy love, rock and roll, all that stuff. That was the greatest movement of Jesus movement within college campuses. The greatest we've seen so far. At the same time. When the darkness is dark, guess what? The light shines brighter. God is always raising up a remnant in the darkest times, in the darkest seasons. Elijah, the prophet Elijah, we'll see his story later in the Old Testament. But he lived in a time with like the craziest queen. You guys know Queen Jezebel? She's crazy, okay? She was going out to kill him, because they were worshiping idols. And he was like, nah, man, we can't do that as Israelites. So they did this like big showdown, you know, between like the Israelites, or between him and the rest of them. They're all calling down their God and nothing. And Elijah's like, God, bring down fire. Poof. And there's this fire. And then Queen Jezebel goes crazy. She's like, I'm going to kill you. And so she's like literally driving into the wilderness to kill him. And he's running away. And he's mad at God. He's like, God, I did the biggest showdown, man. Okay, you're supposed to protect me. What is going on? He's like, I'm done. I'm done being the only one following you. I'm done. And God said, you think you're the only one? You think you're the only one? There is a remnant of 3,000 other people who have not bowed down to that idol. You are not the only one. I will always raise up a remnant of people who will follow me when the darkest times are there. We live in dark times. We do. We live in uncertain times. Church, this is when we stand up. This is when God comes and moves, is in the darkest of times. So my encouragement to you today is this. As we walk back into our lives, our families, our workplaces, sick people, all the things that we're dealing with, sickness, health, all the things, my encouragement is this. In the darkest of times, God's always raises up a remnant who will march out into battle and do what God's called him to do, because we listen and obey and we experience God's presence come through for us. So here's our main point. God is with his people as he leads them. He is not the bad leader who sends you out into battle alone. He will go before you. He will go before you. And so whatever thing you're facing this year that feels hard, believe that God is going before you. Can another praise team come up?